All right, I am going to jump into this because we have a lot of information. I am recording. I'm on it. I'm on it. And then I got right out of camera angle so they can't see me start. Did you see I timed all of that? Good, right. So I'm Dr. Charles Pemberton. I am the clinical program director for the FIT program with Omni Family of Services. So I'm an old college professor, which means you've put me behind a podium with a PowerPoint and I can just roll on with a lecture. So when there's a slide that you have a question or a comment on, please stop me because I always tell people, look, I've got information I want to get through, but it's more important that we get your questions answered, that you understand this. So it's more important that we get your questions answered. And what I find is that if you wait until the end, sometimes you've forgotten what the question is. So please interrupt me, ask the questions as we go. So I'm going to be talking about how to use TBRI or how we use TBRI in our intensive in-home program. So I wanted to start with what our program is, just so you can have an idea of what FIT is, so you can put it in a contextual framework of what I'm speaking for. And so FIT is a crisis stabilization program. We work with children and youth that are either at risk of disruption or going back into a hospital or residential, or maybe have been in hospitals and residentials over and over again. 90-day program where we are going into the home with our team, starting out 4 to 5 times a week. And then we taper that off back down to 2, maybe 3 times a week at the end, depending upon clinical necessity. The belief is that these families have been conditioned to, when there's a crisis, to pick up the phone and call, take them to mobile crisis, or just take them to the hospital, or just, we've got to change their medication. And we want to try to change that behavior of the family in the system, in the home. So we have people call us, unless it is a real safety issue. They call us before they go to mobile crisis. They call us before they call 911 just to have their child picked up. We want to be there to try to show them what could we have done differently and how might that have worked. The team consists of a master's level therapist and a been there, done that family support person. 5 times a week for the first 2 weeks. We say 2 weeks. It really depends upon clinical necessity. It's going to be at least 2 weeks. And then we work with all of the providers, the school. The good thing about us is that we can continue to work with the ongoing therapist. So we don't pull them out for 90 days and say, okay, we're done. Here, you have them back now. When I was in outpatient therapy, I hated that. Oh, wait, they're gone. I've given you my discharge summary, or you've seen my last couple of notes. Now, I don't know what happens for these 90 days, 6 months, whatever it is, and then they just show back up on my schedule and I have to pick them back up and I don't know what's going on. We really believe in continuing to work with that therapist, and luckily with billing, we can do that. We use the Ohio scales for an assessment purpose, and we have really good so far outcomes on those Ohio scales. We do both caregiver and youth. Youth always seems to be a little higher than caregivers. Caregivers are a little bit more critical in how they're going to rate things, but we show a vast improvement on both of those. Okay, so that is our program. We brought TBRI into that because we saw how well that model fits in this crisis stabilization short period time frame. So let me start with, how many people are familiar with TBRI in the room? Okay, I got to bring my A game. Okay. TBRI is very popular in Tennessee. So you'll see kind of how that works. So I'm going to be doing an overview of TBRI for those people that aren't familiar with it, but then I'm also going to be trying to couch that with what that looks like with our program, doing not only in home, but also doing it on a short-term basis. Because TBRI could be used for theoretically forever. We have 90 days. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we try to do that. All right. So TBRI, and I discovered this after doing this lecture for a while. It's really great if you take TBRI and look at it backwards. And it basically says that before I can do an intervention, before I can really help someone, I have to have a relationship with that person. And before I have a relationship with that person, we have to have some sort of trust. So trust-based relational intervention. Before I can help you, we have to have a relationship. Before that relationship, there has to be trust that has to be based on it. And we know that a lot of our families that come from those hard places don't have that sense of trust with anybody. I mean, especially us in the system. I mean, they don't trust us. The youth don't trust their parents. The parents don't trust us. Our therapists don't trust their clinical supervisors. The clinical supervisors don't. Anyway, you see how this stacks. TBRI is a systems approach. Okay, so it's one of those that I tell people a systems approach is that idea of think about the family or whatever it is as a system, a machine, and we're all cogs in that system. And when I start working with a family, I become a cog that I go into that system. And there's generally three things that can happen when I enter into the family. One, the family can grind me down. So all my gears grind down, and all of a sudden now I'm just buying into the system. That's right, that is the sick kid. And if we got that kid out of here, I buy into that. They grind me down. The second thing that can happen is I can be just rejected outright. Nope, that cog doesn't fit into our system, so it gets kicked out. The third thing, and what we're always aiming for, is that as that cog in the system, I change the system. And I change it enough that when I get removed, the system continues to operate in a more healthy way. Those are the three options. But that means we have to look at the system, not just an individual in the system. So I always talk about FIT being we don't work with problem children, we work with families in a situation. I don't want to label the child as the problem. I don't want the caregivers to label the child as the problem. It's going to take the whole system to change this. So in that intensive in-home work, we don't work with, oh yeah, we're working with the youth. So we're working with the family. From day one, when we get a referral, we're calling saying, okay, so this is the program, and we're going to be working with all of you all 5 times a week. Well, wait a minute. That means I'm going to be working with you, mom, and you, dad, and you, and yeah, the siblings will probably be involved in some of these as well. And if we have a family that pushes way back, oh no, I can't. There's nothing wrong with me. We just have to fix them. But we do some MI. We try to get them motivated to come on board and buy into the program. But ultimately, if they're like, no, I don't have time to do that, then they're probably not a good fit referral because we need the whole family to change. And you'll see how that works with TBRI in a little while. So it works with the whole family. It is developmentally respectful. The idea is there's a lot of attachment theory here that as we develop, our attachment styles change. We inherit those. It deals with that issue. It is very well researched. I mean, I've got gigabytes of data on how this works. So if there's anybody that wants to like do some number crunching with me and geek out over numbers, I can do that. We can talk about the power and the alpha levels and all of that stuff. I love all of that piece. But it's been researched, over decades. And the idea is that we're returning people to where they should be on that developmentally appropriate track. When we say, well, they're acting like a typical 15-year-old, yeah, that's kind of what we're aiming for. We don't want a 15-year-old acting like a 30-year-old. We also don't want a 15-year-old acting like a 5-year-old. But as somebody who has had 2 teenagers, and I have 2 grown children, well, they think they're grown, 23 and 19. But when they acted like a 13 and 14-year-old, even though it was very frustrating, that's where I needed them to be. That's how they were supposed to act. That is what we're aiming for here. It's been used everywhere, schools, DOJ facilities. In my training, I was alongside sheriffs and deputies that were implementing this throughout the nation. It's been in orphanages worldwide. I had people in my cohort that did not speak English as it was being implemented in other countries. So all of that has been done. I can share all of that information with you if anybody's interested. But it is designed to work with children, youth, and their families from all risk and all age levels. Now, the one piece, and I will caveat this, that I wish we had time to show you more of is you'll see a lot of videos of younger children. I wish we could show you some videos of some older adolescents and teenagers. With what I've got and the time limit I've got, you're going to see these because it actually for examples it pinpoints it more with those smaller children, but it can be used with any age group. So there's three things in that video that I want to point out for a minute. And one is, um, did that look like some of the children that we work with? I mean, I hear I'm going to cut you with a knife. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I've heard something worse than that at times when I've done this in-home work. The second piece is you hear Dr. Cross use the word manipulate, masters of manipulation. I don't like that phrase. And unfortunately, they're not going to recut the video to give me something I want. TCU's not going to do that, apparently, um, but I want you to think about manipulation as if I know the rules, I can manipulate the situation. But I have to know the rules in order to manipulate. If I don't know the rules, I can't manipulate. I can do things, but it's not purposeful. It's not guided. I'm just doing stuff. And our children from hard places don't understand the rules. So it may look like manipulation, but if I don't know the rules and I'm just guessing, if I'm just trying to get my needs met, and this is the only way I know how, it's not manipulation. I'm just surviving. Okay. And survival is very different from manipulation. Okay. The last piece is when we talk about traumas and things, they talk in this video about, children that come from hard places. And remember that trauma is subjective. So even a family, we have a lot of families that we work with that they're not in foster. They're with the biological parents. And sometimes the biological parents haven't had big T trauma, but trauma is subjective. So there's a lot of things that are going on that we may not realize, the parents may not realize. And the good thing about TBRIs is regardless of whether there's trauma or not, we can use this. Because the T isn't, while it's trauma informed, it's not trauma based, it's trust based. And if I want any sort of relationship with people, I have to start with a place of trust. So what we do at Omni is I'm trying to build that from kind of the top down. I need my regional directors to trust me, to build that sense of relationship, to give them the tools they need, which is the next step. And then if need be, well, then I can correct them. But I've got to start with that trust piece. So when we look at risk, you all know this. Everybody seen this. We all know that, oh yeah, that's the stuff that causes problems. But what we don't often think about is that in a relationship, it goes both ways. A relationship takes two people. A difficult pregnancy from a child, yes, changes some of the neurochemicals in that child and what that child has experienced, that infant experience. But it also has caused issues with the mom, with the dad. If my child is taken to the NIC unit and I can't hold them, I can't love them, I can't bond with them, that affects me as well as my infant. So we have to think about this in both directions, that trauma and that risk is there because this is very much based in an attachment style. So if there can't be that attachment, that healthy attachment, regardless of the direction, that's going to be a problem. And then on the last three, abuse, neglect, and trauma, that's not just for the family that we're immediately seeing. Remember, those things are experienced and are passed down. One of the really interesting things that they did in my training was we took a case study and they could show historically how trauma from a mother, great, 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 great grandmother at the time, was in the war and how she had to pivot her family because of the war. Husband was drafted, got taken out their family, their home was bombed, and had to immediately pivot. And how that was transferred down the line because there was no intervention. There wasn't a therapist, there wasn't a priest, there wasn't a reverend to step in and go, wait a minute, let me teach you how this works. And it just continued to be handed down the line. So that keeps going. Okay. So another piece that we use in with Omni is hope science, the science of hope. And so without that whole issue of trauma and adversity affects hope as well. So the Signs of Hope says that there are three pieces to this. And I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, but it's very much MI, motivational interviewing based. But if you think about, we have a goal and we really want to try to achievement goal versus avoidant goals, they tend to be better for us for all sorts of reasons. The next is a pathway. How do I achieve that goal? And finally, the willpower is the energy to get there. So if I have a goal of not smoking, that's an avoidant goal. But if I have a goal of being healthier, there's lots of pathways to be healthy. Okay. If my goal is to just exercise every morning and I don't exercise this morning, well, then I failed. But if it is to just be more active, okay, I slept in this morning, but you know what? I can walk at lunch. I can do this before dinner. There's more pathways to get there. And then the willpower, success breeds success. Hope begets hope. This is another piece we do. We have 90 days. We cannot solve all the problems in 90 days. Okay. My beginning therapists really think they can. We're going to fix this. I'm here all these days. Not only am I going to stabilize this family, this is going to be the poster family for a mental health. Yeah, that's not going to happen either. So we try to set very targeted short-term goals. We'll talk about that here in a little bit as well. But I think it's important to realize that if you want a family to succeed, you have to pick a goal that they can feel success with. We have 90 days. If I set a goal for 90 days in the future, and at day 89, it's like, yay or no, they're not even going to make it to day 89. We have to set a goal that they can measure tomorrow. Hey, you did that. Great. Or, okay, no, we didn't, but let's change it so you can get to that level of success. We have to have those short-term goals with that. Okay, so going back to trauma for a minute, remember trauma comes from a lot of different places and how it affects us. So the next video talks a little bit about that brain growth, and I'm going to give you some more information right at the end of this. I don't know how many times I've heard it. Okay, so half their age, which is why, how many times are we in it? But he's 16. Why is he acting like a 7-year-old? Because we have the research to show that is what happens. And that's before we get into fetal alcohol syndrome or a head injury or an ID issue or any of those other things, we're cutting their chronologic age in half when we deal with that. I mean, that's pretty powerful when we talk about that. Um, I want to lean in for just a minute on that whole idea of brain growth and development, because when I went through the program and not only was taught, but teaching psychopharmacology and brain anatomy and all that, I was taught that, well, you're born and you have all these neurons and they're all connected. And as you age, your brain pairs off these things and it gets faster by pairing these things off. But that's it. Yeah, we found out that's not right. The brain not only does pair those connections down, but it grows new connections. We know that it can change. So, and we also have evidence to show that therapy physically alters the brain. That's pretty powerful. Traditional talk therapy alters the brain physically. Not neurochemicals, not just all the juice that passes through, but the neurochemical structure, the physical structure of the brain changes. That's pretty important. And that's important to take to our caregivers who are working with these children who often feel like, well, what's going to possibly help them? We can't do anything. They're born, they've already had the exposure to this, it's set. No, we have research to show that we can alter these things. In fact, I was listening to a podcast. Podcast is Armchair Experts. They have some really good ones, and then they have some that I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to do that anymore. And I'm not a prude. I don't mind cussing, but sometimes it's just like, really? Did it need to get that vulgar in this? One of them they did had Dr. Sanjay Gupta in it and on it. And Dr. Gupta was talking about how our knowledge of the brain today mimics our knowledge of our cardiovascular system 50, 60 years ago. 50, 60 years ago, we could take a picture of your heart and go, well, there it is. And I have some bad news. And then we could take a picture and we could start making changes. And then we found drugs and medication that helped. And then we got to the point that PT, physical therapy, actually helped strengthen the heart directly. Not just, well, just go do exercise. Do this type of exercise. We're in the same place with our brain today. It's no longer take a picture and go, that doesn't look good. You got holes where you shouldn't have holes, and it's shrunk where it shouldn't have shrunk. We actually now have medication that works. We actually have physical exercise that targets the brain. So it's not just go out and do things. I'm not talking about Sudoku and those. We have found that walking at a specific pace for a set period of time helps brain health. I mean, that's pretty incredible that we've gotten to that point. I say all of that because our caregivers, we've got to throw everything possible at our caregivers to get them to buy in, because oftentimes they're not there. They've given up. As that first video, I like them, but I don't think I love them anymore. Or I love them, but I'm sorry, I love them, but I don't think I like them anymore. We've got to get their buy-in for that. And so if anything we can throw at them, but wait a minute, no, it's not set. No, you're not done. No, there's a lot of growth that can happen here. So this video, this slide just kind of takes it through 16, and we could talk about where the brain is and all of this and that, and I love the fact that it stops at 16 because it's wrong. For everybody on that side of the podium, brain growth continues until about mid-20s. For people that happen to be standing up, it might be more like late 20s, or according to my wife, it may not happen yet. So, when we have somebody who's even 16 and 18 and 20 years old, the brain is still changing and developing. We can make significant progress with that person. We can't give up. And that's a big piece of this. So how does TBRI work? Well, it says that if we can reattach, if we can make those bonds, we can make that relationship work, we can build trust, we can build self-efficacy and self-worth. We can help them with that sensory component as well as some of the brain chemistry and development. I see the world anymore through a TBRI lens. Okay. I've become one of those people, and my professionals just in my staff just love me because every time it's like, well, what about I know what would TBRI say? I have become that person. To the point that I'll be watching, a rom-com with my wife, and I'll pause it and go, but that really doesn't help the relationship but sometimes can't help myself. Meanwhile, the movies I like, the Marvel and, the Avengers and all that, there's no trauma at all. And with any of those people, I mean, Bruce Banner didn't get, have trauma or the whole, any of they're all good. So we look at how that trauma plays out now across all areas. So TBRI has three overriding principles. And I love this because then it has two strategies for each. So it really works well with my OCD. Be better if it was 3 and 3, but that would be a little bit much. So I'm okay because it's still 6 strategies. That's an even number. Anyway, so I really like this. And when I introduce this on a 90-day program, my staff goes, okay, so what you're saying is month 1 we do connecting, and month 2 we do empowering, and month 3 we do correcting. I'm like, well, that would be ideal, but that can't ever happen. One, we're always doing connecting, and our families always want to do correcting. They want to start there. So when you think about this, they want us to start dealing with the problems, the behaviors. That's where we start. Oh, wait, in day 1 or day 2, we do a treatment plan, and it talks about what are the problems we're going to address. And our MCOs want to know, well, wait a minute, what things are you going to be able to tackle and deal with even before we get started on the pre-auth? What are you going to be focusing on the problem? It's all about correcting first. Okay. And in reality with our families, it looks kind of like this. I will absolutely give him his iPad back, which I know he connects him to his friends and helps calm him down. But he doesn't deserve it. And I'm not giving it to him until he cleans his room. And after he starts doing what I tell him to and gets his room clean, not only will I give him his iPad back, but you know what? We might be able to go out and have some dinner together because he's been wanting to go out to have dinner. I might be able to do that after he does what I've told him to do. That's the way that it works. I will connect with him. I will give him the tools that help him deal with his struggles after he corrects his behavior. So what would that look like with an infant? I'll give you this bottle. You quit crying. You're not getting this bottle till you earn it. You got to quit crying. I mean, come on, just quit crying. I know you can do it, and I'll give you this bottle. I'd love to say we never do that, and we never do that, but unfortunately, we have some families that do. But we wouldn't think about it that way. We would never, you can have the bottle when you finish crying. We know what's going on. Could it be that teenager is acting out because we've taken away their iPad and they're just trying to get their needs met and they don't know how else to do it? I don't know. Maybe there's some control in that. So what TBRI does is turn that upside down. And it says that really before we can correct, we have to connect with someone. And whether that's your staff or your own families or the families you're working with, we have to connect with them first. And then we do an empowerment, which is helping them internally and externally. We'll get to that. And then we can really work on correcting. Now, safety goes above and beyond. Okay. Safety has to come first. But if you don't have a connection with people, you're not correcting behaviors. You're getting compliance. If you haven't formed a connection, you're getting compliance. So I can get my staff to comply with when notes are due. Okay. I can audit the chart. I can write them up. I can put them on a PIP. I can do all those things. I can get compliance. But what happens when I take a week vacation and they know I'm not going to be checking those notes? I've got compliance while I'm there. But if I can walk in and have a relationship with my staff and I can teach them the why of why this is important and how we're a crisis basis, and an ER nurse can't wait 48 hours to write their notes because the patient will be dead on the table. We've got to do these as we go. And I can explain the why and I can get them to buy into it and form that connection. Then I'm not getting compliance. I get them to correct and buy into the program, which is what TBRI really is about. So from the beginning, we walk in and it's not about compliance to the program. It's we want to form a relationship. We want to model that relationship with you, and we have 90 days to do it. And from day one, we start with that. How do we build a relationship? One of the things I'm working with is our DI, and our DI is like, I don't know, 300 pages long, it seems. And I believe that it just re-traumatizes families. So I'm trying to pare it down so we can make it more like a relationship builder than a checklist of tell me everything that's gone wrong with you and your family so I can document it and give you a label. I don't like that. You had a question?
Yeah. So it's the response when families really kind of have an attachment to a particular worker and say, well, if this worker asked me to do this or makes this referral, then I'll do it for that person. Is that healthy based on that trusting relationship, or is that kind of outside of the space of them owning their own behavior?
I would have to know more. I mean, if I were the worker, I would be like, no, that's all healthy and good because I'm the best worker in the world. I think it depends upon a whole lot of factors. I don't think it's necessarily good, but I'm not willing to say that it's bad because if they form that relationship and if the family, think about the youth has been in and out of services. I'm working with this professional and that professional and this professional, and all of a sudden they formed a bond, an attachment with someone. If it's healthy and the worker has a good set of boundaries and things, well, we don't want to just sever that to sever it. But there's a whole lot of other questions that I'd want to make sure that they're not dependent upon that worker. But that may be the first attachment, that first person that they've trusted. And the worst thing we can do is be like, oh, well, nope, you can't work with them anymore. Because now all we're doing is re-traumatizing that whole family on the attachment cycle. But there's other pieces that we have to work with that. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Great question. Okay. And I appreciate you stopped me and asked me. That's great. She's modeling great behavior there. Okay. All right. So there are three main principles with TBRI, and the first one is the connecting principle. And there are two strategies that we work with: mindfulness and engagement. These are primarily for the adult, the caregiver in the situation. And we're going to talk a little bit here in a minute about the attachment cycles, but this is having the caregiver, the adults, really look at what they are bringing into the system. You remember I said that as a therapist, as a professional, we're doing this in their system. We have to get them to look at what they're bringing into the system. Okay. So I'm going to jump ahead and give you an example just so you can couch this. It can be as hard as you've had a lot of trauma and you need to talk to a professional and get and help unpack your stuff. It can be as easy. Okay, now it can be as easy. I'm not saying this is really easy, but on the other end of the continuum, it can be when a parent says, yeah, I picked them up at school and they had a fit, but I realize now that they were tired and they skipped breakfast and they probably skipped lunch. And the school won't let him have a water container anymore because of all the messes that he made with it. And so he's probably thirsty as well. And then a guy asked him a question and he just had a meltdown. So it's probably all those reasons. Yeah, makes sense. Mom, what about you? What'd you have for dinner or for breakfast? Oh, I don't eat breakfast, but I had a cup of coffee. Okay, what about lunch? Oh, I didn't have time to eat lunch. I didn't have time to eat lunch today. I've been running nonstop since the kids left the house. I mean, I no. Oh, so wait, you were thirsty and hungry and tired as well. That's what you brought in to the system. Okay, now I say that here, and you're as professionals, we're all going, yep, yep, see that, see that. But if we don't have a relationship with that mom, when we say that, it's not going to go over real well. So we have to have that relationship first before we can say those things. And that's that piece that TBRI piece again. So this is being aware of your past and what you're bringing into this. The next piece is that engagement strategy. And these are things that we all know. As professionals, we know to do these things. I'm not saying we always do them, but we know we're supposed to always do them. And that's that how you use your voice, playful engagement. And playful engagement is not just playing games. It's that how you can be lighthearted and use your voice. So playing disarms people. It teaches social skills. It is a great way to build a relationship by playing. There's some exceptions that I'll get to, but that is a great way to do that. So it's really important that we do that engagement piece and we model that. And not just modeling it, but modeling it and telling our families we're modeling it. Hey, did you see how I did that? Touch base and check in on them. Going back to with Fit, we try to have that touch base of, well, did you see how I did that? Did you see, did that work? You know, yeah, I don't know why they talk to you. They don't talk to me. Well, what do you see me doing? Asking the questions. Well, what do you see? Do I do something different than you do? Well, yeah, okay. Well, let's talk about those things. We can't just assume that parents and caregivers who are very busy and very tired and very beaten down and have 100 other pans going, that they see what we're doing. We have to point that out sometimes, gently, but point that out. Okay, before I get to the next slide, I want to just touch base. Everybody doing okay? We just had lunch. Okay, tacos, a lot of protein, but a lot of carbs as well. And I saw that dessert table just be empty. So I want to make sure that we're all still here because there might be a quiz later on. Just saying. Okay. All right, this next part of TBRI is what they call the elevator speech of TBRI, which is great, except an elevator speech should be about 45 seconds. And this one is about 7.5 minutes long. So it's the elevator speech on a high rise where we're stopping at almost every floor and you need to get off at the top floor. Okay, that's what the elevator speech of this is. We have implemented this where we teach this to the families. Our medical provider actually goes back over this with the families before and while she's prescribing medication for our families. So we use a lot. She utilizes it there as well. Okay, so we try to utilize this everywhere. So let me take you through how this works. So at the top is a need is expressed, right? And so we'll use an infant. Need is expressed. They're hungry. And what do they do when they're hungry? Cry, right? Well, that's that first circle there on the left, on the right, distress. So they have a voice, cry. We want them to tell us. We don't want an infant to just not tell us they're hungry. So they cry. They express that distress. And then what happens is their sympathetic nervous system fires. Blood pressure changes, heart rate changes, breathing rate changes, all of those things that happen physically when they cry and get upset. When that happens, excitatory neurotransmitters fire. So all of those brain chemistry start happening because of the sympathetic nervous system. But I'm a great dad, and I knew my infant was about to be hungry, so I already prepared things. So the minute they start crying, I'm right there to swoop them up and give them a bottle. Let's not verify that. I'll pretend in this reality here that that's how it happened. And at that moment, they're comforted. They start eating. And then there's parasympathetic nervous system fires that counteract all of that. Their heart rate begins to slow, their breathing changes, their blood pressure changes, all those things happen, which then causes the inhibitory neurotransmitters to fire in the brain that counteract the excitatory neurotransmitters that have already fired. And we return to a place of stasis. That's what happens. And think about how many times in a healthy family, a healthy system, this happens before a child is ever told no. Yes, I will pick you up. Yes, I will change your diaper. Yes, I will feed you. Yes, I will change your diaper again. Yes, I will burp you. Yes, I will hold you. Yes, I will. Yes, I will. Yes, I will. Before I ever say yeses put money in the bank, no's are withdrawal. We ultimately have to have both, right? But our children from hard places are operating on such a deficit of no's because they didn't consistently get the yeses that they're bankrupt. I mean, if I have a bill that's $100, I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna figure out how to pay that extra bill this month, and I'm not gonna do this, I'm gonna forgo the Starbucks, and I'm gonna pay that bill. If I have a bill that's $100,000, I mean, or $1 million or $100 million, at some point I'm just like, yeah, it doesn't. I can't pay that. I'm never going to be able. So why even bother? That's what, bless you. That is what happens with families because they don't get those yeses. So our medical provider explains this as when we're using medication, we are altering that outside ring, whichever side we need to, which alters the middle ring, but it never alters the inner ring. I'm not saying medication's not needed and not important. It has its place. But we have to realize that I can give a child medication, I can give an adult medication, but I'm really not dealing with the distress or the comfort. I'm dealing with the physicality of this, not with what's really going on. Okay? But if I do this and I meet those needs, kids learn trust. Erickson's basic trust versus mistrust. They learn trust. They learn self-worth. They learn that they have a voice. The other piece they learn, and this isn't just one time, this is over and over and over and over. They learn a sense of self-regulation. All regulation comes from an external source first. Say that again. All regulation comes from an external source first. I am regulated, then I can co-regulate with someone, and then I can self-regulate. If I am never consistently taught how to regulate or co-regulate, I cannot self-regulate in a healthy way. And then this lays the foundation for mental health, because what happens in our children's places is they get stuck where they express a need, but it's not met, or it's not consistently met. And you've heard her say it's like child has her finger in a light socket. Well, that's what happens. Those excitatory neurotransmitters just fire and fire and fire, and there's nothing behind them to stop it. And they're just on a runaway train with that because their need doesn't get met. And that leads to this trajectory. Now, I am not saying that this leads to ADHD. I'm saying it leads to ADHD-like symptoms. If we jump ahead to that last one, 12 plus years, bipolar, the definition of bipolar is a lack of regulation, a lack of mood regulation, right? The person doesn't regulate their moods. They have highs and lows, they're all over the place. What I said, if external regulation didn't happen, internal regulation can't. So we get those, and again, I'm not saying it causes bipolar, but it causes those same types of symptoms. And then what do? Well, we medicate the people to give them the inhibitory neurotransmitters and we work in, but we have never met their need. We have never heard their voice. We haven't done those things. Questions? Comments? Pushback? This is your opportunity. There's a whole lot of you. You can just tack me and beat me up, and she can block the door, and I'm stuck. Okay. So the good thing about TBRI is it's based on a whole lot. It's a model. It's not a theoretical orientation. So the other piece I get when introduced to this to my new therapist, and they're like, but wait, I'm a cognitive behaviorist. Like, you've been out of school for one hot minute. But okay, we'll call you a cognitive behaviorist if that's what we need to. You can still be a cognitive behaviorist. You can still be a motivational or Rogerian or client-centered. You can still do all those things because this isn't a theoretical orientation. This is a model. This is saying use all those skills, all those techniques, but we're going to put it in this model. The one theory that it really pulls from is attachment theory. And attachment theory, in the longer version of this, we actually show stranger videos where we leave a toddler in a room for a long time and they cry. And I mean, I've seen one of them we show, I don't know how many hundreds of times. And I'm still, every time I'm like, okay, just somebody pick that child up. Please pick that child up. So we're not going to see. I will tell you that I did this for one of my team. And I now, when I show that video, I warn people. I had a new mom and I underestimated the power of watching a 12-month-old cry on what that would do to a new mom. So now I issue warnings before I show it because, they're safe. It's okay. Okay. So in this, that history will follow families, will follow a child. And so when we look at this is that we have 4 different types of attachment styles. Secure is what we all want to be. If we're not secure, we can become earned secure. So we put in hard work to get there. As part of this 80-hour training that I went through, there was a 2-hour or so attachment interview, which was grueling and a little scary. Luckily, I didn't know when I did it that they could wash me out right there. No, you're out. So we actually go through as a practitioner a attachment interview, and they come back and they say, this is where you are. Which I met the person who did mine, and I said, I think you're wrong. Hindsight might not have been the safest thing to do. So secure, where we all want to be. Caregiver is consistent. They respond warmly. They take care of not only the physical needs, but the emotional needs on a consistent basis. I learn trust. I learn when I ask for something, I will get a response, a healthy response. It may be no, but I'll get a response. They'll hear what I have to say. Anxious avoidant. This is where they don't respond warmly. This is where they might take care of the physical needs, but there's no emotional needs being met. So this is that caregiver who, will provide food, but will be on their phone the whole time, never interact, never providing that level. So what happens is the infant learns not to cry. Because if I cry, you're going to get mad at me and not give me. If I'm quiet and good, you'll give me what I need. In fact, when we see this, and I show the 2 videos, I have a lot of people, most people come back and well, but the anxious avoidant child is better. The person got up and left the room and they didn't cry. They were independent. That's the child I want. I'm like, yes. When they're 18, that's the child you want. When they're 12 months old, you need them to cry and be upset that you left them. But that 12-month-old who's anxious avoidant just sits there and plays with themselves. They're okay. Then we've got the anxious ambivalent. And the ambivalent child, it's inconsistent. The caregiving is very inconsistent. Sometimes when they get upset, they meet them. Sometimes they don't. And so This is where oftentimes the child will cry even when the caregiver comes back in. Because what they've learned is if I stay upset, I will keep your attention. So even though I should be soothed, I'm not. It's interesting when they did this and they did the cortisol levels of children. Even that child that was anxious, avoiding, that just sat there and played with their toys. Oh, mom's leaving. Play with the toys. Their cortisol levels were significantly elevated. Internally, they were still very anxious, but you couldn't see it. That one really bothers me. That child who's really upset, really fearful, that doesn't show us they're upset and fearful. Now I don't know how to read them. And then finally, we have disorganized. And unfortunately, most of our children come from a disorganized place. So the first three are considered organized. We can watch, we can see a video and be like, yeah, that's that. Disorganized, you won't see a video of a disorganized child because they are kind of all over the board. They said they do things that don't make sense. How many times have our caregivers said, I just don't understand why you do that? Important to note that this is a majority of the children that we're working with, that they just don't understand how relationships work. It's important also to note that as people grow up, they're they grow into a different but an associated type of attachment. And we're not going to have time to go into all of these, but basically, it's not a matter of, well, you eventually become secure. No, you don't. Avoidant becomes dismissive, ambivalent becomes entangled with that person, and disorganized becomes just unresolved. They don't understand how these relationships work. So if we're talking about generational trauma, where do we learn how to parent? Our parents who learn from their parents. So this is handed down. So if my great grandfather had a had this unresolved or grew up in a disorganized attachment, that's going to affect his children, who then affects me as their grandchildren. So all that happens. Okay. So we keep all that in mind. So that means that our first goal when we come into with fit is to build connections. In fact, the first goal that I highly recommend, okay, secretly I require this, but I can't apparently use the word require on someone else's treatment plan. That's not ethical. So I use the word strongly encourage, is their first goal is to make their appointments. Just make your appointments. That's it. Because then at the end of a week, not only does the family say, yeah, we made all the appointments, that's great. But my therapist is able to say, well, we hit that goal. I made all my appointments. The total win-win. And in that, we're building those connections. So the first goal out of the gate is to build connections. Safety always comes first. We do safety sweeps weekly with the family. We teach them how to do safety sweeps. We provide lock boxes. Yes, safety is always there. But as a therapeutic TBRI goal, it is to build those connections. And that's the first piece we do. All right, so we get into the second principle, physiological and ecological strategies. So this is where making sure people are internally taken care of. Snickers made this really popular with being hangry. Okay, I used this as an example earlier with, not only the child, but as the parent eating. So this is blood sugar, hydration. It was really interesting that there's a study that says that two things. One, our children from hard places are chronically dehydrated, meaning that it's not that they're significantly dehydrated, but they're just always below the threshold and they don't even know that they're dehydrated. The other piece that we're reading in this is that dehydration can cause up to an 80% loss in cognitive ability. Yeah, yeah. I can't lose 80% of my cognitive. Can't lose 5% of my cognitive ability anymore, which is why, it's like, oh, there's my water right there. So it's one of those that we don't even think about that, but it can really cause a problem. And it can happen so quick. We also have sensory needs. Yes, it is. It is. And again, right. Well, protein snack at bedtime. You're right. Sensory needs, hydration. Sleep is another one of those. Now we get into some of that with routines, and we'll talk about some of that here on that external need, but you're right. Sleep is absolutely one of those. Unfortunately, when I do this as I take my 80-hour training and I pull it down to an 8-hour training, we go through this even in more detail. And that's one of them we talk about here at the matter. There's a whole lot of things that we just. It does. Right. Right. But you are absolutely right. There is that sensory need, that sleep need, eating, drinking, all of that piece that is needed. Sensory needs, remember that there are both defensive and seeking behaviors. This is not a sensory disorder. We're not talking about sensory disorder. We're talking about what everybody needs. We all have these needs. We all avoid, so all of us have put on a piece of clothing and said, nope, not today. That just doesn't feel right. I put on a sock and put on a shoe and taken that shoe back off to reposition that sock a whole lot of times in my life. That is a sensory defensive behavior. So we all have these. And there are three different types. Again, we don't go into them, but we have to realize that when a child is seeking a sensory input, we have to see that need. That's a need. We have to see that need. So we can help them with that with snacks, rice buckets, cutting tags out of shirts, all of these things. Rice buckets are a whole lot better than sand buckets because rice is a whole lot easier to vacuum up than sand. Just sand in all your offices. Rice is pretty easy to clean up. And if you drop your phone in water, there you go. You just shove it, and that doesn't work with sand. The other piece of this is those external strategies. So this is scaffolding things where whether we're trying to build into something or we're trying to teach them something, we have to start with something you do well. Remember, I said we start small. We build on a goal of something we're already doing well. But that also gets that focus away from the problem. Well, they're not doing this. We're not accomplishing this. Well, tell me what you're doing right. Tell me what's going well. Let's build on that. That's that scaffolding. And then daily rituals and transitions. So that ritual is how we go to bed at night, what we do when we come home from school, what we do when we change the location. And transitions, I believe, are the hardest part for our youth. Whether it's transition from school to home or one home to another or residential to back to home or foster and transitions are the hardest piece. Part of that becomes they don't have a sense of felt safety. We all know psychological safety. I feel psychologically safe. Felt safety is not related to actually being safe. Felt safety is feeling safe. I can lay in my bed at night and know my doors are locked and everything is safe, but then all of a sudden I hear something in the house and that sense of felt safety goes, am I really safe? That's where our kids live. In working on those transitions, sometimes empowering the children, empowering the family to look at that. There is always a reason for an outburst. Always. I didn't say we know this, but there always is. And sometimes we can't see that. Sometimes it's an internal thing. Sometimes it's something that happened days before or weeks before or anticipatory anxiety, something that I'm afraid is going to happen that as an adult, we go, that's never going to happen. But all of those are triggers that we may not see. But sometimes if we dive into this, we can. So going back to hope for a minute, one of the things that we try to do here is set those relevant goals. And I'm not going to go through all of this, but it is really important for that one that says problem solve. Here's your homework. What's going to get in the way of you doing it? There's going to be things that get in the way. To just say, well, we've agreed this is your homework and walk away is doing a disservice to the family. Because we all know that there's things and obstacles to get in the way of that. We need to bring that up and be able to point those things out. So in that section, what is the goal? Remember, the first goal was to make those connections, build those connections. This one is see the need. One of the theories, one of the phrases behind TBRI is stay calm, see the need, and meet the need, and don't give up. If we can teach a family to see the need and then look at options and pathways to meet that need in a healthy way, we're really building that empowerment for the child. We're really helping that child become a healthy adult, that system to become more healthy. So therapists come to me all the time with well, this is what's going on. And I would probably say 85% of the time, my question is, well, what's the need? I need them to be able to see what the child is expressing the need or the parent is expressing the need. So that the second piece of that we really work on in that second part, if we get there, is seeing the need with the family and in that system. So the last one, correcting principles. And you'll notice that I spent a whole lot more time on connecting than I did correcting. Yeah, that's because everybody wants to get to this and everybody knows how to do this and this isn't new. So it's like, yeah, and then you correct if you have to. That's kind of where it is. I'm going to give you a little structure in this, but that's where it becomes, we don't talk a whole lot about that. So one of the things we can do is offer choices. And this isn't a, you can clean your room or you can be grounded for the weekend. That's a right or wrong. This is, you can do A or B, and both of those are acceptable solutions. You can take out the garbage, or we'll take the garbage out together. I'm not letting you not take the garbage out, but it's this or this, and either one of them are acceptable. So these are your choices. And that leads to them being able to deal with a little bit of power. It teaches them how to handle those choices. And then it teaches them if they don't like any of those, the next question is, either of those sound like you want to negotiate. We would do. I don't want to do any of them. That's not it. Because as adults, we have to learn. And the goal of parents is to grow a healthy adult. That's the goal. And so they have to be able to do this. So it teaches them that if they talk, their words have power, and it keeps things moving forward versus just no. And then it shows that we can share power. And this is important as well, because ultimately they have to learn how to deal with some power, because they're going to have it when they turn 18 or 21 or 25 or 30 or whatever, when my wife says I have power. At some point that's going to happen. And then they also learn in this is that we can talk through this and safe people will listen to me. So the ideal response. This is something to keep in mind with when you have to correct behavior. So it's immediate. We know the faster you can address that behavior, the more you learn. So the better you make that connection. So this is, the idea of, well, wait until dad gets home. If that's not that all sorts of reasons that. But you want to, even if that is, look, we can't deal with this right now, but this is not acceptable. Deal with this when we get home. You've at least identified direct. You need to get down on the child's level. You need to talk to them at their level. You can't correct the child while you're watching TV. No, that's not acceptable behavior. Or while you're on your phone, texting your friends. You have to stop and deal with them. Efficient. I love this one because efficient is the smaller use of words, the better we are. Parents have a way of asking a question so that it opens up a door for them to deliver a lecture. It's always amazing to me when parents are like, I don't know why they talk to you. Well, because I ask a question and I shut my mouth. And if they don't answer the question, I ask the question in a different way, or I ask another question. I give them space to talk without then lecturing them. So smaller use of words. Action-based. For little children, this is really important because we want to give them a redo. Try it again, and then they get to do it right, and I get to say, good job, you did it right. For older kids, it's really good, at least cognitively, be like, well, let's role play that, or let's think how that would have been. What would you have said? What would I have said? Just to kind of give them that idea of what would have really happened. And then finally leveled at the behavior. It's not that you're bad. It's that that's not acceptable. Okay. There are, with that, in that E being effective, we talk a little bit about, we're going to talk a little bit about the different levels. And there are 4 levels of engagement. And I will tell you that parents always jump the gun. Something that should have a level 1 response, they want to give you a level 3 response. And it's their own background. It's where, well, this is where it's going to go. So I might as well just get ahead of it. Maybe it's not going to go there. Let's see if this works. And if it does elevate, you can elevate along with it. So the first one is that playful engagement. If it's used effectively, it can take care of a whole lot of those problems. And this is, can you try that again with respect? Are you asking or telling? It's said in a playful tone. You're just kind of bantering a little bit with them, not sarcasm, but bantering with them a little bit, because this can help deal with things like rolling their eyes or a sassy tone. If somebody has a sassy tone, I don't need to send them to their room. Can we do that again? With respect. Okay, so I'll tell you, my 19-year-old now was 18, and he came home and he told me that he was going to take his car and drive from Louisville to Ohio with a bunch of his friends to go to a tournament. My immediate thought was, does your mom know that? And then it was, that's not your car. That's our car. And it's my gas, it's my insurance. But I said, so he was telling me, Michael, are you asking or telling? And he said, no. No. And even though he's incredibly smart, he wasn't at that moment. And he said, well, I'm telling. And I quickly then went into a level 2 response. Level 2, you pause. So are you asking or telling? Well, I'm telling. Okay, I need to explain. I sat down. I mean, I came across the room and I said, we need to talk. And these choices. My tone changed. It became more structured, became more even, because in this, what happens at level 1, their brain is engaged. Level 2, it's starting to go here. Level 3, their higher brain functions are disengaged. I'm talking to the limbic system. Okay, they need to regulate before they can use cognitive techniques. So level 2, I give them choices, but then I return to that playful engagement. When I get to level 3, this is where they can't regulate. So now I'm ready. This is, you put them in a time in. We don't use the word time out because time out separates that connection. So you're going to sit here and I'm going to be here. We're going to calm down, see what we can do. All of these go back to playful engagement. We always want to get back to that. So this is, they determine their needs, their higher brain functions are disengaged. And then finally, we have level 4. Now, TBRI doesn't really teach about level 4 because this is based upon state, agency, all sorts of things. But this is where there's a safety issue, where it's going to be more possibly hands-on. This is when the child is a danger to themselves. Oh, thought I had till 3. Ah, okay. All right. So real quickly, I will say this. When our last one, when it's over, that engagement, it has to be over. It's not over until that connection has been reached. Which where we leave here is that goal of how can I teach the families how to correct without losing the connection. My information is there. If you want to send me an email, I'll be glad to answer an email, send you anything that you like. I appreciate your time. Oh.